"That's not yours," barked Officer Marcus Dean, snatching the blue sapphire bracelet from Julia Bennett's hand. The high-end lighting of Langford Jewelers cast cold shadows on the glass counters as murmurs broke out. Julia, 39, a reserved woman in a pale blue cardigan, stood motionless, clutching her tote bag. She had come in to buy a retirement gift, not to be accused of theft. What neither the crowd nor the officer knew was that the man quietly arranging watches at the other end of the showroom wasn't a clerk. He was Alan Bennett, Julia's husband, a 47-year-old district police commander working undercover. That morning, Julia had stood in their hallway mirror, adjusting the collar of her modest blouse. With her hair in a soft bun and her delicate pearl earrings, she looked more like the first-grade teacher she had been for 17 years than someone who would ever set foot in a precinct. "You sure you don't want me to come?" Alan had asked, standing in his study, coffee in hand, report stacked on the desk. "It's just a bracelet," Julia had smiled. "We're all chipping in for Teresa's send-off. After 35 years in the classroom, she deserves something beautiful." Alan's brow furrowed. "Langford's been flagged. 3 customer complaints. Same officer on every call. Marcus Dean. He transferred from the West Side precinct 2 months ago." "Dean? The tall guy with the buzz cut?" Alan nodded. "That's him. Something feels off. I'm heading there today anyway. I'll be in and out. You won't even see me." "I'll be careful not to blow your cover, Commander," Julia had teased before kissing him goodbye. She arrived at Langford's just after noon. The boutique was nestled in an upscale plaza, its display windows gleaming with curated opulence. She took a moment in the car to steady her nerves, running her fingers over the envelope of pooled staff contributions, just under $3,000. Inside, the air was cool and scented faintly with polished wood and jasmine. A chandelier refracted light across the display cases as Julia made her way to the sapphire section. Teresa always loved blue. A silver-haired man greeted her. His name tag read, Douglas Langford, store manager. "Good afternoon. Looking for anything in particular?" "Yes," Julia smiled. "A retirement gift. Something with sapphires, if possible." Langford's eyes swept over her modest attire. His smile thinned, but he led her toward the most expensive section anyway. "We have several tasteful options." Julia spotted a bracelet, 14 sapphires, white gold, diamond inlays. It caught the light like a stream. Langford slipped it onto her wrist. "This one's $9,200. Her eyes widened subtly. "Oh, it's lovely, but perhaps something simpler?" He didn't hide his disdain. "Of course. Not everyone appreciates high quality." Julia felt the sting of the remark but stayed composed. "We appreciate value. Just within a budget." While he showed her a more modest piece, the door chimed. Officer Dean entered. Tall. Broad. Commanding. Langford's posture changed instantly. "Officer Dean. Back for your rounds?" "Routine check," he said, eyes immediately locking on Julia. Something unsettling passed through his gaze. Julia chose a silver and sapphire bracelet priced at $2,750. Just within reach. She paid. The manager boxed it, bagged it, and handed it over. She turned toward the exit. Then came the voice, "Ma'am, I need to check your purse." Julia blinked. "Excuse me? We've had thefts. It's protocol." People turned. The moment grew thick. "I have nothing to hide," she said, heart racing. She handed over her purse. Dean dug through it, and then held up the expensive $9,200 bracelet. Julia gasped. "That's not mine. I gave it back to Mr. Langford." Langford approached. "I never received it." Julia's voice trembled. "I'm a teacher. I would never. Dean grabbed her arm. You have the right to remain silent. She looked around, eyes begged for someone to speak. No one did. Except for the man in the black vest, whose eyes met hers with unshaken calm. Alan. But he didn't move. Not yet. Officer Marcus Dean recited Julia's rights as he pulled a plastic evidence bag from his pocket and dropped the bracelet in. I didn't steal that. Julia's voice cracked, heat rising to her cheeks. Check the cameras, asked Mr. Langford. Langford crossed his arms, shaking his head solemnly. I showed her several pieces. That one never came back. These things happen when people. He hesitated, letting the implication hang in the air. People like me? Julia asked, incredulous. Dean tightened his grip. Let's go, ma'am. Customers stepped back, murmuring, but no one intervened. Julia caught Alan's gaze again. He remained near the watch display, still posing as a staff member, eyes narrowed, tracking everything. Out on the curb, the sun hit Julia hard. The boutique's shadows had masked her shame, daylight exposed it. Dean opened the patrol car's rear door. Watch your head. Julia slid in, pulse pounding. From the tinted glass, she saw Langford watching, arms folded smugly. Something between Langford and Dean, it felt rehearsed. Coordinated. As the car pulled away, she asked, Officer Dean, is there anything I can say to convince you this is a mistake? He looked at her through the rearview mirror, his eyes like cold steel. Save it for the judge. People like you, respectable-looking types, you're the worst. Always think you can fool the system. People like me, she echoed, voice tightening. I'm a schoolteacher. Not a thief. Dean scoffed. That's what makes it easy to believe. Act innocent while your hand's in the cookie jar. Tears threatened, but Julia blinked them away. Her only crime had been kindness, chipping in for a gift. Back in the store, Alan Bennett was already on the move. Inside the boutique's back office, Alan moved like he belonged. Earlier that morning, he had discreetly installed hidden body cameras across the store, devices small enough to avoid detection but powerful enough to capture everything. The official security feed was already tampered with, no surprise. Alan had seen it too many times, victims framed, footage edited, audio scrubbed. But his cameras told a different story. He watched the scene unfold again, now from a rear angle, Langford, with a sleight of hand, dropping the expensive bracelet into Julia's open purse while casually drawing her attention to another display. Then, a quick nod between Langford and Officer Dean. That was the moment the trap closed. Alan tapped his earpiece. Commander Bennett here. Protocol 717. Suspects confirmed. Langford Jewelers. Primary target, Marcus Dean. Secondary, Douglas Langford. The voice on the other end responded instantly, confirming protocol. Intercept team en route. Development? They framed my wife. A pause. Copy that, Commander. We'll extract her before booking. Alan ended the call, downloaded the footage to his secured tablet, and exited the office with fire in his chest. As calm as he appeared, his every movement was calculated. They had crossed the line. They had touched Julia. And now, they would answer for it. The interview room was every bit as gray and lifeless as Julia expected, gray walls, gray chair, gray table. She sat alone, staring at the security camera in the corner, willing it to blink, to glitch, to tell her this was all some twisted mistake. But it didn't. She refused to cry. Not here. Not now. Instead, she folded her hands in her lap, clutching the bracelet receipt still tucked in her purse pocket like it was a lifeline. The door opened. A tall woman in a burgundy blouse and short-cropped gray hair entered. Her badge read, Detective Alina Chavez. Mrs. Bennett, she greeted calmly, setting a file down. "I'm Detective Chavez. I understand there's been some confusion today." "Confusion?" Julia leaned forward, her voice trembling with equal parts fear and indignation. "I was accused of theft. I was arrested in front of strangers. I'm a teacher. You don't need to explain." Chavez opened the folder and nodded. "You're free to go." Julia blinked. What? "Officer Dean has been suspended pending an internal investigation," the detective said coolly. "We believe he's been part of a coordinated scheme with the jewelry store's manager." Before Julia could speak, the door opened again. Alan stepped in. Still wearing the black vest from the store, he looked tired, furious, and impossibly relieved all at once. "Alan," Julia gasped, rising. "You were there. You saw." He crossed the room in 3 strides and wrapped his arms around her. "You're okay?" I think so," she said into his chest, her resolve finally cracking. Detective Chavez gave them a moment before clearing her throat. "Commander Bennett has been investigating Officer Dean for nearly 6 weeks. He suspected there was an insurance fraud ring operating out of Langford's. Until today, though, we didn't have conclusive proof." "You knew?" Julia stepped back, looking up at her husband. "I never thought they'd target you," he said solemnly. "I was there to observe Dean's routine. When I saw you walk in, I didn't expect it, but it gave us the opportunity we needed." Chavez slid a tablet across the table. "You'll want to see this." On screen, 2 videos played side by side. On the left, the store's official security feed, Julia seeming to slip the bracelet into her purse while Langford looked away. On the right, Alan's hidden camera, Langford himself slipping the bracelet in with a practiced hand as Julia turned to view a tray of earrings. Julia's hand flew to her mouth. "He set me up. Just like that." "They've done this before," Alan confirmed. "At least 7 other times that we know of. They target people who look like they don't belong, people they think won't fight back." "People like me," Julia whispered, stunned. "Yes," Chavez said. "But they didn't count on you being the wife of the man investigating them." Julia sat in silence, watching the videos loop again, side by side, undeniable. On one screen, she appeared guilty. On the other, Langford was caught red-handed. "This is what they've been doing?" she asked, voice thin. "Planting jewelry on innocent people?" Alan nodded. "Langford files an insurance claim. Dean makes the arrest. Charges get dropped, but by then, the payout is processed. Then the item mysteriously returns to inventory." Chavez added, "They've profited tens of thousands. The worst part? Most of the victims never fought back. Some pled guilty just to avoid jail." Julia closed her eyes. "And I was just supposed to be the next statistic." Alan's jaw clenched. "They made a mistake." Chavez stood. "You're free to go, Mrs. Bennett. You'll need to give a statement later, but for now, we'd like to take you home." As they walked out, Julia hesitated. "What happened to Dean? And Langford?" "They're both in custody," the detective answered. "Officer Dean walked right into our trap when he brought you in. As for Langford..." She glanced at Alan. "He placed him under arrest himself," she smiled. It was poetic. Outside the station, the late afternoon sun cast warm light across the lot. Julia took a deep breath, letting it fill her lungs. Alan put a hand on her back. "I'm sorry you got pulled into this." She looked up at him. Her composure had returned, but her voice was clear and firm. "Don't be. I'm not just your wife. I'm the woman who helped bring down a corrupt cop." 2 weeks later, Julia stood in front of her first-grade class, holding up a storybook titled, "Telling the Truth." She paused, then asked, can anyone tell me why honesty is important? Little hands shot up. Julia smiled. The irony wasn't lost on her. Her worst moment had become her greatest lesson. News of the arrests had spread quickly. The headlines had praised a citizen's courage in helping expose a criminal ring inside the police department. But nowhere did her name appear. Alan had insisted on protecting her privacy. What mattered was the system had worked. 7 other victims were now in the process of having their records expunged. As for Julia, she had found a deeper appreciation for Alan's work, and for justice itself. It wasn't just about punishment. It was about restoration. The days that followed were a whirlwind of statements, paperwork, and hushed phone calls. Julia returned to her quiet routines, though now with a keener sense of observation. At school, she noticed how quickly people judged, how assumptions lingered behind glances, who looked like they belonged and who didn't. Her colleagues were shocked when they learned she'd been framed. Even more so when she mentioned, gently, that she hadn't been the first. One evening, sitting at the kitchen table, Alan placed a manila folder in front of her. "What's this?" she asked. "Background on the other victims," he said. A single mother. A retired postal worker. A foreign exchange student. All accused of theft. All at Langford's. All quietly dropped. Julia flipped through the pages, her chest tightening. They picked people they thought wouldn't fight back. Alan nodded. They played on fear, shame, silence. But they didn't count on someone having a voice. She looked up. Or a husband who wouldn't let it go. The department launched a full internal investigation. Officer Marcus Dean was dishonorably discharged and faced multiple felony charges, including conspiracy, evidence tampering, and official misconduct. Douglas Langford was charged with insurance fraud, racketeering, and unlawful entrapment. Both men tried to shift blame, but the footage was airtight. Alan's hidden cameras had done more than prove Julia's innocence. They had exposed a pattern, and that made prosecution swift. Detective Chavez personally thanked Julia in a closed-door debriefing. "You reminded us what this badge is supposed to mean," she said. "Courage. Integrity. Not power and control." But the effects weren't just legal. Julia began receiving handwritten letters, quiet words from people who had once been silenced. "I thought I was alone. I didn't know anyone believed me. Because of you, my name is being cleared." She didn't reply to all of them. But she kept every one. Folded. Pressed between pages of a journal that had started as a way to process trauma. And now had become a testament to truth. 2 weeks after the ordeal, Julia was invited to speak at a local educators' conference. The theme, character in the classroom. She hesitated at first. Public speaking was never her strength. But Alan had looked at her across their kitchen table and said, "Tell your truth. Somebody needs to hear it." So she stood before a room of 100 teachers, principals, and school counselors. Modest blouse. No makeup. Her calm presence silenced the audience more effectively than any microphone. "I'm a first-grade teacher," she began. "I teach little kids about honesty, kindness, and fairness. What I didn't expect was to have to live those lessons in front of strangers, under accusation, under arrest, in a jewelry store." There was a hush. A shifting in chairs. She continued. "They didn't see me as someone trustworthy because of how I looked. They saw me as convenient. Safe to blame. Easy to dismiss." Julia told the whole story, without bitterness, but with the weight of truth. She spoke about the systemic cracks, about how justice doesn't move unless someone pushes, and about how silence isn't always peace, it's often fear. But justice, she concluded, isn't just about punishing the guilty. It's about protecting the innocent. And sometimes, that starts with standing up, even when your voice shakes. The room rose in applause. Some stood in tears. That night, the local paper ran a headline. Teacher turned truth-teller, Bennett's story sparks reform talk. Meanwhile, at the precinct, Alan pushed through the final paperwork to recommend policy changes. Independent third-party footage required in jewelry-related arrests. Mandatory double verification of shoplifting claims involving high-value goods. Officer rotation every 60 days for high complaint locations. The department approved all three. They'll never run this scam again, he told Julia that night. She smiled faintly. Good. But let's not forget why they thought they could in the first place. Alan nodded. Because they thought no one would fight. Spring faded into early summer. Langford Jewelers closed permanently. The storefront remained empty, a shadow of what once stood for wealth now serving as a silent monument to greed and betrayal. Marcus Dean pled guilty. In a quiet courtroom, Julia sat in the back as the judge read the charges. He didn't look at her once. She didn't need him to. The justice system that had once failed her had, in the end, corrected itself. But only because someone had demanded it. Julia never sought attention. She didn't grant interviews. She turned down every podcast, article, and profile request. To the world, she was simply a schoolteacher from Eastport who was in the wrong place at the wrong time. But to those who knew, her students, the other victims, her husband, she was something more. One afternoon, as her class worked quietly on their art projects, a little boy named Mason raised his hand. Mrs. Bennett, he asked, is it true that bad people always get caught? She paused. Her chalk squeaked slightly on the board as she drew a balance scale. Not always, she said gently. Sometimes bad people get away with things for a while. But that's why good people have to be brave. Even when they're scared. Even when it's hard. He nodded slowly. Another child asked, were you scared? Julia smiled softly. Yes. But I spoke up anyway. Later that day, she walked home past the park near her school. A breeze moved through the trees, and she thought of everything she had learned. That truth is powerful, but fragile. That trust must be earned, not demanded. And that justice doesn't just happen. It's made. By people who refuse to stay silent. She stopped at a bench, watching the sun dip low, painting the sky in streaks of orange and gold. Alan would be home soon. Dinner would be simple. Life would go on. But somewhere, perhaps in another quiet neighborhood, someone else was standing up. Speaking out. Just like she had. And that, Julia thought, was enough. Core values learned from the story. 1. Justice doesn't arrive on its own, it needs someone to stand up for it. Even though Julia was publicly humiliated and falsely accused, she did not break. Her courage, combined with Alan's quiet investigation, helped turn the tide. Justice doesn't operate automatically, it requires brave people to demand it. 2. Appearances can be deceiving. Julia and the other victims were chosen because they looked like easy targets, modest clothing, quiet demeanor, working-class backgrounds. Never judge someone based on appearance, the truth lies in actions and integrity. 3. The power of persistence and collaboration. Without Julia's resolve, Alan's surveillance, and Detective Chavez's willingness to act, the corrupt scheme would have continued. When good people work together, the truth finds its voice. 4. Corrupt people repeat their crimes, and that's what eventually exposes them. Langford and Dean had used this setup on at least 7 other victims. Their overconfidence made them repeat the scam, this time, with the wrong person. Injustice may repeat itself, but justice only needs to be right once to strike back. The lesson for us all. If you witness wrongdoing, don't stay silent. If you're falsely accused, don't give up. The truth will find a way. If you hold power, use it to protect, not to exploit. If you're an ordinary person, don't think you can't make an extraordinary difference. Because sometimes, it's the quietest voices that change the outcome, just because they dared to say, "I didn't do this. And I will prove it."